welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we are going to take everything we've learned in our last two episodes with the lemon sponge and the lemon Swiss buttercream, along with a couple of our older recipes like the raspberry jam and the fruit mousse, which we're going to make raspberry mousse this time. And we're going to put it all together and show you the assembly method for our cake. So we're going to start with the sponge cake that we made. This is the raspberry jam. This is the lemon Swiss buttercream. And some lovely raspberry mousse. Now we're going to show you a couple different ways that you can assemble your cake. First of all, you want to make a decision if you want to even off the top, which you don't have to. It's not required if you don't want to. Now we want to make a layer cake, so we are going to cut this as close to even as possible. It is sometimes easier to do this if you do it vertically, like putting the cake down and cutting parallel to the countertop. It doesn't have to be perfectly even. If you're on a very slight bias, it's not going to hurt you too much. But you do want to make sure, if you notice that there's a slight bias, which there was when we cut it at this time, if there is a slight bias in your cut, you want to make sure that you know which direction the bias goes in. So the easiest way to do that is to just cut a little notch in the side of the cake. It goes all the way from top to bottom. That way you can just line it up. So if you're going to be assembling the cake as is, you know exactly where to put it so that it doesn't have much more on one side than the other. Now we do want to even it out along the side. We're also going to end up putting this together in this ring mold. In this, it's basically a ring cutter. So we are going to cut off a little bit of excess on the outside, make sure it's all nice and even on the outside. And then we're going to assemble this inside the mold. This makes things a lot easier. You don't really need to grease the mold to do this. We're going to refrigerate this once it's been assembled and then pop it out a little bit later. We'll show you that soon. Now, if you have seen Claire Saffitz do her baking sort of academy on the Bon Appetit channel, you know she uses a soak. We are also using a soak for ours, but ours is just booze. We're using a little bit of rye, and you just want to give a little bit of a paint. You don't want to soak it through, but you do want to give it a little bit of liquid in there so that it doesn't dry out, and a little bit of booze doesn't hurt in cases like this. Although if you don't drink or you don't want to use booze, there are lots of other options for a soak, and I do recommend the Bon Appetit channel for that. So we're going to put a layer of the raspberry jam down. We just boiled this down so that it would be more jelly, more solid at room temperature. Then we're going to put in a layer of the mousse. And I'll have a card somewhere along here to show you with a link to our fruit mousse video. And you just want to get that as even as you can. So we're just going to spread that around until it's good and even in there. You don't want it to be too cold when you're working with it because it does make it tough to work with. The mousse will get quite stiff and harder to make an even coating of or an even layer of. So now we're going to take the top half, and once again we are just going to give it a little bit of a brush with the rye. Now the rye we used was Canadian Centennial rye, which has this lovely sort of molasses flavor as well. So it add a little bit of sweetness in this otherwise rather tart and sour sort of cake with the lemon and the raspberry, which are some of my very favorite flavors. And you see Chef Caleb here is going to add another layer of that raspberry jam to the top half. And you want to get that again nice and even. And then we're just going to pop that right on top of that layer of mousse. And you don't have to go overboard. You don't have to use a whole lot. Just enough that you've got that nice tart raspberry jam in there. You want the flavor, you want the look. So here is another method of doing it. Now this one we are going to use a slightly smaller ring mold. So it's going to take a little bit more off the side. And you just want to give it a little twist while you're cutting. These ring molds, these cutters are not extremely sharp, so you do want to make sure that you're giving a little bit of motion so it to help it move through the cake. You can cut off any extra with a knife. Now, if you can use some of that extra to make a cake pop or anything like that, you can just eat it, and that's what we did. And there you go. So that's going to be nice and even all the way down. And then for this one, we do want to even off the top for this one. This is another way of doing it. It makes a slightly more refined looking cake. It's going to be a little more even, quite pretty this way. You're going to be throwing away, well, not throwing away, of course, you're going to eat some of that cake that you're cutting off. But you're going to be, the cake itself is going to be smaller in this case. And once again, you want to give a nice sort of even cut all the way through for your layers. And if there is a slight bias, just give that little notch and you're in good shape. A little trick that Chef Caleb uses is he will put the notch where the seam in the, as you can see here, where the seam in the ring is, so that he knows exactly where to put the second layer. And then once again, very simple, we're going to use the soak. So just a quick little brush of the rye. And then we're going to add a layer of the jam. Followed by a layer of the mousse once again. So get that jam nice and even. Followed by that layer of mousse. And then as even as you can. And then finally we're going to add that top layer. Once again, a quick brush with the soak. A little bit of that raspberry jam. And then on the cake it goes. Now, because we have cut the top, again, we're going to line that notch up with the seam on the cutter. Now, because we have cut the top off of this, we're actually going to add another quick little brush of the soak to the top here, because we don't want the top to dry out, because it doesn't have the baked layer on top. We just want to give it a little extra soak on the very, very, very top. And of course, you're going to want to use some kind of liqueur that has a complementary flavor to what you're using inside the cake. So now we're going to refrigerate those for a while. While that's refrigerating, we are going to get out our buttercream frosting and bring it back up to room temperature. It's been in the fridge for a while. It's not a great texture when it comes out of the fridge, but all you need to do is put it back in your stand mixer or even whisk it for a little while until it gets fluffy again. It comes right back, this Swiss buttercream. Really, really useful. And a really, really great icing to work with. Quite easy and very forgiving as well. So these are going to come out of the fridge. Once the mousse has set a little bit more, we want them to be a little bit more solid than they were when they were at room temperature. And you can see they're pretty tightly in there. So what we're going to do is, if you have a creme brulee torch, the easiest way to do this is just give it a gentle little heating along the side with your torch. Now, you don't have to do it this way, of course. You can warm it up with your hands. You can warm it up with just like a warm towel around it or something like that. Anything like that is fine. This is just a really fast and easy way to do this. So give it a little push and out it comes. And you can see those great layers in there. Perfect. So we are going to start icing this. Now, if you, like us, do not have a real baking stand or an icing stand or a cake tray or anything like that, you can use whatever you have on hand. We just use the bottom of the springform pans that we use to make the cake on top of a bowl. And that will give you a little bit more control over everything. You will need to hold it for sure. And then from there, it's just icing it. So you're going to get a nice dollop of that beautiful buttercream on there. You want to be careful not to stir up the raspberry stuff from beneath. And you want to get a good even layer, a good even coating of your icing on there. At this point, it's up to you how thick you want the icing. Now, we are not experts at cake decorating by any means, but a trick to get it a little bit smoother is if you have the back end of a quite hot knife, so just run it under really, really hot water, and you can just run it along that buttercream, and it'll get it nice and smooth like this. Now, we're going to decorate these with some fresh raspberries because we wanted to sort of keep it on theme and all the flavors together. So we're just going to put these little raspberries on here. Now remember, these are little micro cakes. They're really small. So this cake is going to get divided 6 ways, and everyone will get a slice. So 6 little raspberries on top is just perfect. So that's going to go in the fridge for a little while, and then when it comes out, we are ready to go. So we're just going to cut this. The mousse is solid. Well, not solid, but good and firm inside. The icing has gelled quite nicely. So we're just going to cut. So we have a little raspberry on each slice. And there you go. There is your cake with the beautiful layers inside. That beautiful lemon sponge cake, the lemon Swiss buttercream icing, the raspberry jam and the raspberry mousse, and then decorate with a little fresh raspberry. Now, of course, you can use any flavor combination you like. You can use strawberry. We made a beautiful passion fruit mousse in a previous video. We'll link to that. You can use that, whatever you like. The world is your oyster. We hope you enjoyed this cake. It was really fantastic, and we ate it in record time. So if you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.